What is the most effective way for us to respond to the redefinition of marriage? This is the CitizenLink Report. I'm Stuart Shepard along with my friend and colleague Tom Minnery. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Stuart.
First, what was your take on the Supreme Court ruling that redefined marriage?
Well, I was profoundly disappointed, just like most people who watch us and follow us. We knew it was coming. It was in the card, so to speak, for about the last year, but it was a body blow and a jolt to the spirit when it arrived. The court found a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. It's not in there.
Yeah.
The Constitution says nothing about any kind of marriage, and the depth of the outrage by the 4 justices who wrote minority opinions disagreeing is something to behold. Those jurists are angry at what the majority did.
I was really moved in particular that they were pointing out there is no constitutional argument in what the majority did. There's no legal argument that you could really base this on. They just did it.
They did it, and we haven't seen a result like that on an issue like this since 1973, when the court found a right to abortion in the Constitution. It's sad, and we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Now, I've been reading a lot of commentary out there with Facebook and just commentary from religious leaders and whatnot. There's a broad range of conversations going on about the nature of our response and what we should do. I'm going to give you a few of those. I just want to get your take on each one. First, the question came up, should we be outraged? Some leaders are saying, yes, we should be outraged. Others are saying, yeah, it really won't help much. What do you think?
Well, obviously, the 4 judges writing in the minority opinion were outraged. Outrage is understandable. It's not sufficient. Outrage needs to be channeled into productive response, productive activity. And that's going to be political activity. And we're on the verge of a very significant presidential election. We'll get better judges when we have a different president who nominates better judges. That's the way out of this.
Now, I've also seen there are statements out there that people have signed on to calling for civil disobedience. I'll be transparent, my heart resonates with that. I think that may be the right thing to do. What do you think?
Well, let me turn that question on you. What do you intend doing, or what comes to mind? Do you intend to go to Washington and handcuff yourself to the pillars of the Supreme Court building, or take to the streets with a sign and block traffic? What does that mean? Probably
wouldn't go that far, but in terms of if I were asked, if my church was told you will have a same-sex marriage in your gymnasium because you rent it out to other groups, I would say no, and let's go to court over it. I mean, that to me is the kind of civil disobedience I'm thinking about.
Well, that is productive, and that may come, but not yet. It will be a while before further laws are passed requiring churches to do that, although they may come from surprising locations, from localities passing non-discrimination ordinances that have no exceptions for religious organizations and churches. We are watching those. We are fighting against those. We've had a lot of success in this past legislative year fighting against those so-called SOGI ordinances, or sexual orientation, gender identity laws. That's the fight of the future.
And we've also actively been working to help pass religious freedom legislation in the states as well. You want to talk about that?
Well, that's right. Religious liberty is adequately protected in federal law, not in state law, for reasons that would require another program to explain. And it's incumbent upon states to pass Religious Freedom Restoration Religious Freedom Restoration Act type laws. Once again, we are leading the charge on those laws, and about 31 states have adequately protected themselves with those laws, or their state courts have adequately issued rulings that protect religious liberty. But the fight goes on in the rest of the country.
And when we talk about actively supporting, we're talking about radio ads, phone calls, direct mail, that sort of thing.
Yeah, grassroots activation, mobilizing people at just the right moment to make their voices heard to just the right legislator who needs to hear those voices to do the right thing on a bill.
Very good. Now, the next 2 here are a little stronger, but I want to get your opinion on them. I've got some Facebook friends who immediately said we need to impeach the 5 liberal justices who redefine marriage. And reading through the dissents, there is a logical argument for that, a legal argument for that. But what do you think about the reality of that?
The reality, the political reality is slim. Only one Supreme Court justice has ever been impeached. That was in 1804, Samuel Chase. And although he was impeached, he was not removed from office. He was impeached when the House passed bills of impeachment against him, but he was not convicted in the Senate. The same situation with President Clinton. He was impeached in the House, but he was not removed from office because the Senate refused to convict him. And I do not think there is political will, even in a conservative-led House and Senate, to pass those bills of impeachment in the House, although they may get out of the House, but I don't think the Senate has the will to try and convict those judges based on their judicial beliefs. Now, were they ethical problems, it would be different, but I don't think it's in the cards.
Now, the first time President Obama was going through the campaign to be elected, I did a little video, a little stoplight called Pray for Rain. It got a lot of negative attention. I just bringing it up because the key line in that was, I still believe that marriage is the union of one man and one woman, and I want a president who will appoint justices to the Supreme Court that agree with that. That little prediction in that video is now a reality because he appointed 2 of the justices who basically said marriage should be redefined to what it is. That is the proper path, though, the election of a president, to bring in new Supreme Court justices.
Yes, and that's why outrage is insufficient. Channel that outrage. Work in a presidential campaign. It's going to be a fun year, particularly in a number of key states where the election will be decided.
Now, the other somewhat extreme idea here, but it's getting some traction and some big names are signing on to the idea, is an Article 5 Convention of the States. Tell us what that is and what it would possibly do.
Well, Article 5 of the Constitution allows state legislatures to change the Constitution if they think the federal government is going in the wrong direction or getting too big for its britches, and a lot of people think that today. There is a movement, it's called Convention of States, led by capable people. One of them is our longtime friend, Michael Ferris of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Another one is another leader of that organization is Mark Meckler, formerly of the Tea Party organization, and it requires 2/3 of the states to vote to assemble a convention. And then if they vote out changes in the Constitution, it requires 3/4 of the states, that would be 38 states, to ratify those. And while the subject would not be as specific as marriage, it would be about limiting the place of the federal government and its courts to be involved in state issues like marriage. So it may indirectly impact marriage. Now, you say it's extreme, and it is, has not been done. However, at this time, the Republican Party controls 70% of state legislative bodies. Now, that's not 70% of the states, that's the House or the Senate in each state. All told, Republicans control completely the House and the Senate of a state legislature in 31 states. It takes 34 states to accomplish this task of getting the convention called. So it may be possible.
Yeah, and it's not unusual, I have to point out, at the state level, that there are some Democrats who would favor this idea. It might even be possible even in those states, perhaps.
Depending on the topic, depending on how the approach is made, and depending on the reasonableness of the case that is made. Convention of States has an informative website. People ought to check it out and learn more about this.
Yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on it as we go along to see what happens. Let's get practical, and those are big ideas and all, but people at church are asking me the simple question, what can I do today? What can I do right now? How do you answer that?
I say what I said before. Find out who is running for president, who reflects your views. Now, there are a lot of people who reflect our views running for president, but I think that people ought to get involved in those campaigns. The Supreme Court justice will be changed, as I said, when a president whose values we share nominates those judges. And the time is right because the Senate is in Republican Party control, more likely to confirm those judges who support our values. So things are getting interesting. It's an exciting time, a time for engagement. Citizens have a requirement to honor the governing authorities. Romans 13 requires that. Our governing authority asks for our involvement in the government. And that's why I'm disappointed in those who are just outraged. It means they haven't been paying attention. And please pay attention. And please involve yourself in a political campaign. If you cannot do that at the presidential level, then someone running for Congress or someone running for a state legislature seat, because it might well be that your involvement in that state legislature candidacy might tip the legislature toward wanting to convene this convention, Article 5 convention. We'll see.
Very helpful. Tom, thank you for your insights. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Now, it is clear that the efforts to silence Christian organizations that will continue to speak out for marriage, as we understand it, as the union of one man and one woman, those attacks against those organizations, including us, will only continue to ramp up. We've seen it with small business owners who work in the wedding industry, but now we can expect it to begin impacting what's being taught in public schools to your children. It's going to affect nonprofit ministries you support and potentially, eventually, even your church. That's why CitizenLink and our alliance of nearly 40 family policy councils at the state level are standing for the family of believers. And we've been working since before the last election to try to get the religious freedom legislation that Tom was talking about passed in the various states, and more than 30 of those have been successful so far. We'd like to see those in all 50 states, and we'd like to see the ones that are out there strengthened even more. So far, we've had those victories, but when you stand with CitizenLink through your prayers and through your financial support, you are joining us on the front lines as we defend religious freedom for your family. So, what can you do? You can join us by clicking on the link that's below this video and supporting the work here at CitizenLink. Thank you in advance for that support. And remember, stand tall and be heard.